A researcher holds up a key. The parrot looks at it, tilts its head. "What's this?" The parrot answers immediately. "Key." The researcher swaps it for a small cork. "What's this?" "Cork." Then she holds up two objects side by side. A red block, a green block. "What's different?" The parrot studies them for a second. "Color." This isn't a trick. This isn't a bird that memorized one sound and repeats it on command. This is a parrot named Alex, answering novel questions about objects he had never seen paired together before in real time. For decades, the standard explanation for talking parrots was simple. They're mimics, copycats, biological tape recorders repeating sounds without any understanding of what those sounds mean. Alex's research team spent 30 years proving that explanation was incomplete, and around the same time, neuroscientists studying parrot brains found something that made the picture even stranger. A structure inside their brains that exists in almost no other animal on Earth. Today, we're going inside the real reason parrots copy human voices, and the discovery that changed how scientists understand animal communication forever. To understand why this matters, you have to understand how rare this ability actually is. Vocal learning, the capacity to hear a sound and deliberately reproduce it, is astonishingly uncommon across the animal kingdom. Humans have it. A small handful of other mammals have it, including dolphins, elephants, and some seals. And in birds, it exists in only 3 separate groups: songbirds, hummingbirds, and parrots. Every other bird species on Earth, thousands of them, is born already knowing its calls. Fixed, unlearned, hardwired from birth, the same way a rooster doesn't need to be taught to crow. Parrots are different. They have to learn their sounds, the same way a human child learns language by listening, experimenting, and gradually refining what comes out of their mouths. In the wild, this skill exists for a very specific reason. Young parrots learn the unique vocal dialect of their own flock, the specific calls and inflections that let other parrots recognize them as belonging to that particular group. When a parrot is raised by humans instead of other parrots, something remarkable happens. It doesn't stop using that vocal learning ability, it simply redirects it toward us, toward the voices, words, and sounds of the flock it actually has, which happens to be human. Here's something most people never think about. Parrots don't have vocal cords, not the way humans do. Instead, they have a completely different organ called the syrinx, located deep in the chest at the point where the windpipe splits into the 2 lungs. Unlike the human voice box, the syrinx is essentially a dual instrument, capable of producing 2 independent sounds simultaneously, one from each side. The muscles surrounding the syrinx can independently control tension, airflow, and shape on each side, giving parrots an extraordinary degree of control over pitch and tone. In large species, like the African Grey, the syrinx itself can measure roughly 2 centimeters. In a tiny budgerigar, it's smaller than a grain of rice. Parrots also have something else most birds lack: a thick, muscular, highly mobile tongue, remarkably similar in function to the human tongue, capable of shaping airflow into distinct vowel and consonant-like sounds. None of this anatomy evolved for the purpose of imitating humans. It evolved millions of years before humans existed, for producing the complex calls parrots use to communicate within their own flocks. But that same flexible anatomy happened to be perfectly suited for an entirely different kind of imitation, once these birds started living alongside us. The anatomy explained how parrots could physically produce human-like sounds. It didn't explain why parrots are dramatically better at this than almost any other vocal learning animal. In 2015, a research team at Duke University, led by neurobiologist Erich Jarvis, set out to answer that question by examining parrot brains directly. What they found had been sitting in scientific archives, unnoticed, for over 3 decades. Every bird species capable of vocal learning has a specific set of interconnected brain regions dedicated to that skill, sometimes called the song system. Researchers had assumed parrots had a version similar to songbirds. They didn't. The Duke team discovered that the parrot's song system has a structure found in no other bird studied. A core center, surrounded by an entirely separate shell of additional neurons, essentially a second, wrapped around copy of the same vocal learning circuitry. Every single vocal learning region in the parrot brain, examined across multiple species, showed this same core and shell duplication. Researcher Mukta Chakraborty described it as almost impossible to have missed for so long once you finally knew where to look. Nobody yet fully understands how this duplicated structure evolved, or precisely how it functions differently from the simpler systems found in songbirds. But researchers believe this shell system may be the reason parrots can continue learning entirely new sounds throughout their entire adult lives, while many songbirds lock in their vocal repertoire early and never significantly change it again. The anatomy and the brain structure explain how parrots produce these sounds, but the deeper question researchers wanted answered was different. Do they understand any of it? This is exactly what animal psychologist Irene Pepperberg spent over 3 decades studying with an African Grey Parrot named Alex. Alex wasn't trained to simply repeat words on command. He was taught to use words functionally, to identify objects, colors, shapes, and materials, and to answer direct questions about them. The results, published across dozens of scientific papers, were extraordinary. Alex could correctly identify the color of an object, the material it was made from, and could compare 2 entirely different objects, correctly stating which single quality they shared or differed on. He wasn't simply matching sounds to memorized responses. He was demonstrating the ability to categorize new, unfamiliar objects and answer novel questions about them, questions his trainers had never asked in that exact combination before. More recent research adds even more depth to this picture. A 2025 study on budgerigar brains found individual neurons that appear to correspond directly to specific vowel and consonant sounds, described by researchers as something close to a vocal keyboard, allowing for the kind of flexible, improvisational speech patterns typically associated with human language. This stands in sharp contrast to species like the zebra finch, a songbird capable of vocal learning but locked into rigid, largely unchangeable patterns once learned. Parrots aren't just repeating a fixed recording. They're actively assembling sounds, the way a person assembles words into new sentences they've never spoken before. If this is completely changing how you think about your own parrot, or any parrot you've ever met, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this kind of research reach more people. So if parrots can genuinely understand and manipulate meaning, why do they bother copying human voices in the first place? The answer traces back to what vocal learning was always meant to accomplish. Even in the wild, bonding. Parrots are extraordinarily social animals. In the wild, they rarely spend their lives alone, living instead within tight-knit flocks built on constant vocal contact. Learning and matching the specific sounds of your flock isn't decoration, it's identity. It's how a parrot signals, unmistakably, this is my group, and I belong here. When a parrot is raised in a human household, that same deeply wired instinct doesn't disappear. It simply redirects toward the only flock available to it, you. This is why parrots often repeat specific phrases tied to particular routines, specific tones of voice used in specific emotional contexts, or sounds that reliably earned them attention in the past. They aren't randomly recording audio. They're doing exactly what their brains evolved to do in the wild, listening closely to the flock around them and using shared sound to strengthen the bond. Researchers studying companion parrots note that vocal mimicry often increases specifically around moments of social engagement, attention, excitement, or affection. Not because the bird is confused about what species it belongs to, but because, in the deepest evolutionary sense, sharing your flock's voice has always been one of the clearest ways to say, without any words at all, you matter to me. This research doesn't just change how we understand parrots, it's changing how scientists understand the biological roots of language itself. For a long time, complex vocal communication was treated as something uniquely, almost exclusively human. Studying parrots complicates that picture significantly. Researchers describe the similarities between parrot vocal learning and human speech development, as a case of evolutionary convergence. Two completely separate evolutionary lineages, birds and primates, arriving independently at strikingly similar biological solutions, a specialized vocal organ, dedicated brain circuitry, and the capacity for lifelong vocal flexibility. Erich Jarvis and his team believe studying exactly how the parrot's duplicated brain structure works could eventually offer insight into human speech disorders and how our own brains process the complex task of producing language. None of this means a parrot is having the same kind of internal experience a human does when we speak. Researchers are careful about that distinction. But it does mean something the old, mindless mimic explanation completely failed to capture. A parrot repeating your words isn't simply echoing sound. It's using ancient, sophisticated biological machinery built for genuine social communication, redirected entirely toward you. So the next time a parrot copies something you said, word for word, tone for tone, remember what's actually happening inside that small, feathered head, not a recording played back without thought, a duplicated, sophisticated brain structure found in almost no other animal on Earth, an organ capable of producing two sounds at once, and an instinct older than humanity itself that says the surest way to belong to a flock is to speak its language. If this changed the way you'll think about the next talking parrot you hear, subscribe to Birdhearts so you never miss the next hidden superpower in the bird world. And tell me in the comments, did you know parrots might actually understand some of what they're saying? I'll see you in the next one.